People are eating less, and it's starting to break and make the economy. Hey Carnies, and welcome back to the Daily Carnage Show. I'm Shannon, I'm a digital marketing strategist at Carney, and I'm your host. So grab your protein-fortified coffee, and let's get started. So you guessed it, today we're talking about GLP-1s. This simple clinical category has begun to disrupt everything from medicine to consumer behavior to macroeconomics. So GLP-1 receptor agonists like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound were originally designed to treat type 2 diabetes and obesity. And they do this by targeting how the body regulates blood sugar. These drugs mimic a natural hormone called GLP-1, which helps the pancreas release insulin when blood sugar rises. And it also reduces the release of glucagon, which is a hormone that raises blood sugar. These drugs also slow down how quickly food leaves your stomach, which can help smooth out those post-meal blood sugar spikes. And we've seen that over time, this combination improves glucose control, reduces A1C levels, and ultimately lowers the risk of diabetes-related complications. So we know this has been a huge positive disruption in the world of diabetes and obesity. But why do analysts say that this is one of the most disruptive consumer forces that we've seen in decades? Well, because at their core, GLP-1s are disrupting appetite, consumption, and behavior at scale. Between 8 and 10% of Americans are already taking GLP-1s, with significantly larger portions expressing interest in the medication. And as that adoption increases, industries are repricing and retooling and reorganizing around new and less demand. Research shows that households with a GLP-1 user reduce their grocery spending by more than 5% within 6 months, and higher income households reduce their spending by 8%. And those reductions are very clearly concentrated in categories tied to impulse consumption. So we're talking about snacks and sweets and baked goods and ultra-processed foods. As marketers, we know that the consumer packaged goods industry is built on scale. More bites, more occasions, more frequency, more demand. These are product categories built entirely around engineering repeat craving cycles. But now GLP-1 medications are appearing to disrupt that cycle at a biological level. GLP-1 users are reporting feeling fuller quicker, reduced hunger signals, and diminished reward response to these high-calorie foods. And when you look at their purchasing behavior, we see declines in purchases of things like chips and cookies and sugary beverages and other discretionary snack categories. And so what we're seeing are manufacturers and marketers pivoting. If you strolled the middle of the grocery store lately, you may have seen higher protein formulations, smaller portion sizes, really nutrient-dense snacks, foods that are designed to fill you up and curb your hunger. And we're even starting to see GLP-1 compatible positioning. This is really a structural redesign of grocery strategy. It's no secret that protein in particular has become the dominant marketing axis across so many categories that have historically had nothing to do with protein. Everything is getting reframed through this metabolic lens. Everything has to have protein in it now. And this isn't only because protein is the latest dietary fad du jour. Raise your hand if you survived the diabolical low-fat trend of the 1990s. The reason is also physiological. GLP-1 users are actually being advised to prioritize protein because protein can help you preserve your lean muscle mass while you're losing all of this weight. So what we have is the food industry trying to rapidly adapt to not just lower volume consumption, but also different nutritional priorities altogether. And there's a bit of a paradox here because while calorie intake may decline overall, per dollar value per product may begin to rise. And the GLP-1 wave is of course not just hitting grocery stores, but restaurants too. Early indicators suggest that GLP-1 users dine out less frequently, and when they do, they're ordering smaller portions. And we're seeing these meaningful declines in restaurant spending, particularly in fast casual and quick service categories. So restaurants too are adapting by experimenting with smaller plates, high protein menu sections, lighter portion pricing structures, and also just overall wellness-oriented branding. But this is a fundamentally different business model for the majority of restaurants that focus on maximizing volume per visit. So this decreased appetite and demand and new behavioral patterns from GLP-1 users has of course impacted the food and beverage space first, but naturally the effects are starting to trickle down to retail. Because GLP-1 users are eating less and in many cases radically transforming their lifestyles and routines, they're also often undergoing visible physical changes. And that begins to trigger identity-based consumption shifts. So while spending is down in grocery volume, we see it rise in apparel and beauty and skincare, in wellness and fitness, and even experiential categories. This phenomenon is called a halo effect, where weight loss tends to lead to renewed spending on appearance, self-presentation, and lifestyle signaling. Of course, a new wardrobe becomes necessary, but we also see cosmetic routines expand, fitness engagement starts to increase, and self-investment categories grow. So essentially the story is that while some sectors do lose volume, others gain entirely new demand pools. And beauty and personal care has sort of been an under-the-radar winner. Really rapid weight loss can have some cosmetic effects that aren't always welcomed by the GLP-1 user, and this has been discussed extensively in medical texts. They've noted skin laxity and facial volume changes, and even hair thinning associated with these rapid metabolic shifts. And so all of these changes have really driven demand for skincare and dermatology services and scalp treatments, things like collagen supplements, and even cosmetic procedures tied to post-weight loss changes. So the beauty sector is, of course, reacting and building product lines accordingly. Next, are GLP-1s a threat to gyms? If people are losing all this weight medically, why do they also need to exercise? In fact, it looks like the opposite dynamic may be forming. Many users appear to be combining their GLP-1 therapy with structured exercise programs, particularly strength training to preserve that muscle mass and tone. It's sort of a shift from fitness as a weight loss tool to more of a body composition optimization tool. And that shift in perspective tends to favor boutique fitness studios and personal training services and wearable technology, as well as protein supplementation brands and recovery-focused wellness. In other words, fitness isn't being replaced by GLP-1s. It's just sort of being repositioned and redistributed. Interestingly, though, even industries that are further removed from consumption patterns are starting to report potential effects from GLP-1s on the rise. Airlines, for example, already factor passenger weight into fuel consumption models, and analysts say that widespread weight reduction across populations could theoretically reduce fuel costs at scale. This would of course be gradual and diffuse, but it's a real possibility. And this just goes to show you that once a behavioral shift becomes population-wide, even marginal variables become economically relevant. And this is to say nothing of the effect that GLP-1s have had on the pharmaceutical industry. JP Morgan Chase projects that obesity drugs could become over a $100 billion annual market over the next decade. And so the competition is fierce. Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly and Company currently dominate the category, but you have competitors like Pfizer and Roche and AstraZeneca aggressively developing these next-gen treatments. And the expectation across the industry isn't just continued growth of these GLP-1s, but expansion into other metabolic and cardiovascular and overall preventative health. And it should be said, at the moment, these GLP-1s are still incredibly expensive for the average American. US list prices can exceed over $1,000 per month without insurance coverage, which is pretty interesting because if these drugs improve health outcomes and productivity and overall long-term healthcare costs while being sort of unevenly accessible, we're at risk of really deepening socioeconomic divides, creating a two-tier public, one that has access to metabolic optimization and another that doesn't. And as we know, obesity is already correlated with income and healthcare access. And so the rise of GLP-1s could really amplify these existing inequality patterns until we see pricing and coverage begin to expand. In conclusion, we talk a lot about AI disrupting every industry, particularly marketing right now, but I think GLP-1s are a worthy peer to AI right now. By changing hunger signaling, they're radicalizing how people eat and spend and drink and treat themselves and work out and adorn themselves. We're talking about changing consumption behavior biologically and at scale, which means that marketers are going to have to revisit what consumer demand really means at all. And if you're in the CPG space, your project may no longer be more is more. But on the other hand, if you sell hair thinning serums and collagen supplements, you may also be pretty busy for different reasons. The point is that when appetite is chemically adjustable, it completely redefines how consumer economies behave. And if adoption continues to expand, it's likely that no matter what sector you're working in, it's going to be disrupted. And with that, I would love to hear if this GLP-1 wave has hit your desk already. How is your brand or organization preparing? Is someone keeping an eye on the research? Have you seen sales decline already? Or are you already midway through a protein rebrand? Make sure to swing by our weekly discussion thread in our subreddit, The Daily Carnage, and let me know. And that wraps it up this week for The Daily Carnage Show. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, make sure to like and subscribe across all our socials. And don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Carnage newsletter. We send an issue every day of the work week to keep you the sharpest marketer in the room. Have a good week, Carnies, and I'll see you in the inbox.